it's me, the lunch lady, in my very own kitchen. And today, I'm going to prepare for you a random Southeast Asian inspired noodle dish consisting of noodles, tofu, peanut sauce, and vegetables. Here, these were the kind of rice noodles that I happened to have on hand. My Fun rice sticks, product of Taiwan. And here's a random spice assortment that I got at an estate sale. And trusty sesame oil, soy sauce, a little sweet and sour, some ginger in a tube, jalapeno pepper, tofu, firm, extra firm, mushrooms, the remnants of a box of mushrooms, onion, yellow squash, red pepper, asparagus, peanut butter, and garlic. So a number of these things were dumpstered or found, so things like this, it's not even because it was dumpstered, but partly because it was already old when I got it and had it a little while. I'll just cut off that part. Now usually what I would start with is onion. I start almost all my dishes with onion, but in this instance, because I have the tofu, I want to start with the tofu because I really want to fry it very, very well. So this package of tofu that I have comes with two sides that are individually sealed. So I'm going to just use one side because the other one is so conveniently going to remain sealed. And I can use it for something else. So I'm going to start with just cutting in to the package kind of carefully so that you don't spill out the water. And then you got to dump out the water. Kind of squeeze it. Otherwise it'll spill everywhere when you're taking it out of the package. So now I'm going to kind of be emulating a Thai dish that I had recently. And there's many ways to cut up your tofu for frying it, but I'm gonna cut it the way that they did at this one restaurant. It kind of had these logs, like if you were gonna have 6x6s of lumber, but on a really smaller scale, that kind of squared length logs. I think this one could be cut one more this way. So now we have these cut into logs. I put a bunch of olive oil in this skillet that is all melty now and ready to receive my tofu. I'm just going to lay each piece in individually. Careful not to get splashed with oil. I'm going to turn down the temperature. So now they're all in there pretty evenly, and that way I'll be able to flip them evenly and make sure each side gets really well fried. And that's one of the best ways to get your tofu to hold together in your dish. Otherwise it'll kind of fall apart if you don't fry it up first. And some people will actually squeeze the water more out of their tofu to make sure that it fries really well. And I didn't really do that this time, but I think it'll just take a little longer to fry. So the next thing that I'm going to add is still not the onions, but the mushrooms, because mushrooms also, in my opinion, are best when they're cooked for a really long time. Now I can get to chopping up my onion. I think I'm actually going to put in my entire onion. Now my favorite kind of onions are red onions, but I don't actually have that strong of an opinion. It was just my chef friend had a favor of red onions and made a case for them, but I'm kind of, I wouldn't say at the mercy, but in my little game that I play with life, I'm at the mercy of the dumpster gods when it comes to what kind of onions I have. So it's one of the most commonly found vegetables. This guy has some little spots that I'm just going to cut off. There are many ways to cut an onion. You may ask, why is she using such a small knife? And that's because I have larger knives, but they're not sharp right now. And this one's really sharp, and I will choose sharpness over size any day. So it looks like I'm just kind of cubing this onion. I used to do bigger pieces of onion, and then I kind of got sick of that, and I like smaller pieces, and it'll all cook down really well. So I have flipped over my tofu, and it's gotten pretty browned on the other side, and my stove is kind of lopsided, so the oil is kind of drifting over to one side. It's deeper over there, and the ones in the shallow end are better browned than the ones in the deep end. So my water came to a rapid boil, and I turned it down to just above low and put in my whole package of noodles. Obviously, if I were making a smaller meal, I would only use a portion of the noodles and save the rest, but I'm making a pretty big one. And so I'm using all the noodles, and this kind of vermicelli type rice noodle just needs maybe a couple minutes to cook. So as I'm turning over the tofu to yet another side, it's really good to have this thin metal spatula so I can get under it kind of like a knife first and make sure that I get any pieces up from the skillet that might be sticking to it. So I have strained the noodles and set them aside on a trivet so that they don't continue to cook. And just flip the tofu to the final side. And now that my tofu is all browned and crispy, I'm going to add in these mushrooms. Sometimes instead of working with different skillets, I like to just use different sections of the same skillet. And now the mushrooms have had some time to go in there, and I'm going to add the onions. Notice I use the back end, the non-sharp end of the knife blade to scrape it off of my board so that I don't dull it in the process. I love sharp knives. And now at this point I'm going to just be less careful about everything laid out and using something to protect my hand from the hot skillet handle. Just kind of start stir frying everything around. Get the onions on the bottom and the tofu on the top so it doesn't burn and so the onions cook. So I've started chopping up the asparagus, and I'm just going to chop it into little pieces for this stir fry. And there's definitely vegetables I think will and won't go in things like this, but a lot of it has to do with what I just happen to have around the house. So I don't think there's rules about what specifically should go in a recipe the way that I cook. So I'm going to compost the very ends of the asparagus because they're more fibrous and dried out. The rest of it I can use. Also, if you don't want to use your knife to scrape your vegetables off, just use your spatula. And I'm just going to stir fry everything around again. Now with about each ingredient that I chop up, I chop pretty fast. So it's good enough to stir just every time I add an ingredient. But if you're a slow chopper, you might want to turn around or go to your stove and stir it a few times while you're slow chopping. And so I like to cook my vegetables in the order that they'll take to cook. I don't have any really fast cooking things I'm putting in it other than garlic, but I usually think of peppers as kind of taking a longer time, and squash not quite as long as the other things I put in, but that'll be the order that I chop everything since I'm cooking as I chop. And so with my peppers, I'm just going to remove and compost their centers, take out their seed part. And if I remember correctly in this dish that I had, and I really did try to remember it, so pretty sure I do, they are just these very thin, long pepper slices. So that's how I'm going to do these. And you know, pepper's always easier to, especially if you don't have a very sharp knife, to cut from the inside as opposed to if I were going to cut from the outside in. They're way easier to cut from the inside part out. Add in my peppers. Stirring around. You can see I'm just using one hand right now instead of the handle. And I think of my jalapeno pepper as being in the same category, aka the pepper category, as the red pepper. So I'll put that in about the same time, even though I'm chopping it up much smaller. And that's also because this is going to be spicy and I want the spice to really integrate with the food for a while. So if it has longer to cook, then it's going to really soak into everything instead of just be weird spice on top of it. And I'm going to cut this into thin slices first, and then little baby tiny slices the other way. So now you have a nice even grouping to work with, so if you're going to be just chopping it chaotically, they're starting at a similar small point. And I'm chopping this up pretty much as if I were mincing garlic. Now I'm going to put this in. The spicy peppers. And like I've said with my veggie taco video, it's about to start getting spicy in here and I might start choking. Now the last vegetable remaining to chop is going to be my yellow squash. And I will just chop it like so. I like doing everything really quickly in these streamlined little techniques. Time to add the squash. Stir it all up. You see I was breaking up the pieces that stuck together from being cut. So now I'm going to cut up my garlic and just have it ready and oxidizing for the very end when I'm going to add it in. I'm going to crush it with some kind of blunt object first. You don't have to crush it completely, but crushing it is going to help take the skin off. It also works to put your cloves of garlic between 2 cups and shake them around like they're dice in a casino. I don't know if that's how they do it in casinos actually. But it kind of seems more involved to me. You have to find the right cups and everything. Maybe if I had special garlic cups I would do it that way. So I've taken off their skin, and much like how I chopped the green pepper, I'm doing these lengthwise little cuts and then perpendicular little cuts, and they fall out into these little tiny slices. And keep your fingers kind of bent up towards yourself so that you don't accidentally cut your fingers, especially working with sharp knives and tiny cuts and slippery things that can get out of your way. Kind of takes some practice to cut garlic this way. So now I'm going to just chaotically chop. The chaotic chop can turn your cutting board. I like small cutting boards, honestly, because that way you can turn them easy, you can pick them up. Sometimes it can get hard keeping everything on the board, but I feel like I'm in practice more or less with keeping everything on it, and it's worth it to have a small cutting board. So now I'm just going to leave this while I add my spices to my food. First I'm going to give it one more good stir. Starting to smell really good just on its own. The delicious natural flavors and aromas of sauteed vegetables. And one thing I decided to add that I didn't show you at the beginning because I forgot these are called kaffir lime leaves, but they're just basically lime leaves that are commonly used in South Asian cooking. And I probably used them wrong. I just kind of tear them up and put them in. There's probably some other way to do it, like bay leaves or something. But they are especially good with green curries. And this isn't a green curry, but it's still going to be really good for that South Asian influence in my flavor that I'm going for. I'm just leaving out the fibrous middle stick of the leaf. And this smells so good. It just smells like green curry to me already, just smelling the lime leaf. And I had these in my freezer. You can just keep them frozen and use them when you feel like it, so you don't have to look for kaffir lime leaves every time you go to the grocery store in case you're out. Okay, give that a stir. Dropped this. Now I'm going to add my random seaweed, baobab, coconut, pineapple, electrolytes, antioxidants, fiber sprinkle collection. Because what the hey. Should be enough. Gonna add from this tube of fresh ginger. That's a lot, but this is kind of a ginger blend, so it'll be alright. The ginger blend is pretty sweet, so I don't want to put too much sweet and sour sauce in. Just a little should do. I'm going to add my sesame oil. I'm pretty liberal with it. I'm in the liberal sesame oil camp. I kind of like to do the spicing part as quickly as I can so that the nutritional and flavor values of the spices don't steam out too much. You know, don't kill yourself trying to go fast, but, you know, do it as quickly as is comfortable. because it will make a difference in the nutritional value of your food. Next, I'm going to add soy sauce in preparation for peanut butter so that it'll be nice and liquidy when I put the peanut butter in, and it can kind of melt and spread across. Now, if I were making a peanut sauce itself, I would be using coconut milk and soy sauce and various other spicy things and peanut butter and cooking them all as one sauce. And that is a great option if you don't feel like putting it all in at once. But I'm just being kind of lazy and chaotic right now, and I have faith that this is going to all mix together because I have enough liquid to mix in my more viscous materials. And I am actually pretty careful about how much peanut I eat too. I don't think of it as one of the healthiest legumes or oils, but I'm gonna have to make an exception for peanut sauce in Southeast Asian food because it's amazing, and everything in moderation should be fine, right? So now that I've got this pretty well mixed up, I'm gonna let it sit and cook for a little while longer and then add in my garlic. Look how much freaking garlic I'm adding. So you saw me chop up all that garlic, and I'm going to make an executive decision to leave out a little bit of it and save it for later because I don't want to over garlic my food. It wouldn't be as much of an issue if I had roasted the garlic beforehand, but this is going to be almost raw because I'm almost done. I'm going to even turn off the, I almost said flame, but it's not exactly a flame, the burner, and just let the heat remaining in the burner and the cast iron skillet and the food itself cook the garlic the rest of the way. So I have the choice now of either serving it separately, noodles and vegetable stir fry thing, so people could take their own amount that they want, or I can just add all the noodles, and after much deliberation have decided that I am going to mix my noodles in the pan. I like to kind of cut them up a bit. Maybe this is sacrilegious, but I cut them up a bit so that it's easier to stir it all together. I like to do this so that the flavor will sink into the noodles more as it sits together, instead of having a really plain flavored thing that you're trying to juxtapose with a very flavorful thing. So there you have it. A wonderful Southeast Asian style inspired noodle and tofu dish. And you have been joined in good company by Georgia the dog, who loves to watch everything I do, especially if it's in the kitchen.